If you had to select a maximum of 2 qualities that make for an effective member of the European Parliament, what would those qualities be?
You've got to be a fantastic, first of all, fantastic communicator and negotiator, and I feel that I've had good grounding from that from a very early age, from the age of 8, having been brought up in a newsagent. My father and mother used to make me talk to anyone and everyone, and I was forced to go and knock on people's doors, so it was good training in terms of going canvassing and having the door closed in my face. And then subsequently, when I started my career, I was actually working in pharmaceutical sales, and that is really not that dissimilar to dealing with the general public when you're out canvassing and campaigning. And, you know, and it has been said to me, even by the opposition party, you know, the Tories even in Wandsworth, that whilst they didn't used to agree with anything I said, obviously on policy grounds, they felt that my arguments were always put across quite well. Secondly, I think you need to be a good problem solver, because there are going to be issues, and I've already got experience with those. I've obviously done a piece work both as a local councillor and when I was a parliamentary candidate as well, and as a scientist as well. That is often reading lots of material and putting it together and then solving it. So I think they're the 2 skills that I would say that I have.
Thank you.
That, of course, the public's very disillusioned with politics and the political elite, and they then proceed to demonstrate precisely why people are disillusioned with politics and political elite. So, could you give us some indications of how we might reverse that disillusionment?
Last time, at the general election, we did get it wrong. We didn't talk about the elephant that has generally been in the room, which is immigration. And I think we have to have that discussion with the electorate, so when they do bring it up, we have to give them the opportunity to actually talk about it. But when you start opening up that conversation and you're talking to them, you know, it turns out that actually it's not immigration that they're talking about. It is jobs, it is housing, it is the economy, it is education, it's all the normal things that matter to them. And the way to encounter it is by having that conversation and then persuading them that it is only the Labour Party that can actually bring some of those changes about. And also explaining to them that whilst UKIP speaks all the rhetoric and gives us the rubbish, they're not actually going to make any other differences. If we were to pull out of Europe, for example, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take 15 to 20 years. And I don't know if you saw it, you probably did. There was a poll done in April by Ipsos Mori, and they asked the UK electorate about the things that matter to them in the top 25, and actually Europe was at number 12. It was immigration that was at number 3. But I think we have to go out there and talk to everybody, and I actually will say this as well, that I don't think people that have been canvassed, Tories or Liberals in the past, shouldn't be actually talked to as well, because, you know, every single vote is going to count in the east of England. And the other thing is that if we don't actually get our vote and other people to actually vote for us, even next year, there's no way we're going to get the MPs that we actually need in 2015. If we don't win seats in the east of England in 2015, there's no way we're going to get a Labour government either. So therefore, we have to be talking to everybody and explaining everybody. I think there's a knee-jerk reaction. I think we have a problem that, you know, the media isn't on our side, unfortunately. But if the media aren't reporting it for us, I think we have to get out there, all of us, you know, across the region, having that conversation with the voters and persuading them on a one-to-one basis.
You know, what would be your killer argument to say why we need to be part of Europe? You know, what has Europe ever done for us? What is Europe continuing to do for us? And how do we work towards an engagement in European politics and the European project amongst voters in this country? How do we build or rebuild that engagement?
What would my killer argument be? Well, I can't argue with the fact that it's an economic argument, but I would also say that we have a social argument as well. The things that Europe has brought, which are, you know, clearly demonstrative of social democracy, are things like the Working Time Directive, the ability to have statutory paid leave, consumer rights. You know, it's just been announced a few days ago that all 27 commissioners have finally voted, and it's really dear to my heart, because that, you know, they're going to get rid of roaming charges, about time too. Other things like when you travel, you know, Consumer Credit Act and things like that, they've all come to us because of our membership of the European Union. And I think there's a lot more that can be achieved, and it's actually better if it's achieved across Europe. I would actually campaign for not just a minimum wage. I think we could actually have a living wage across Europe, which would also then stop some of the abuses that are going on with gang masters bringing in people from abroad and then employing them here on contracts that are applicable in their own countries and basically paying them less than a minimum wage. So there is more that can be done. In terms of how do we work towards this, I think we have to have a conversation to say that it's not perfect. There is a lot that can be reformed and does need reforming, things like the Common Agricultural Policy, for example. And there are other things, you know, some of the bureaucracy that Europe brings with it. I mean, I actually personally think that it's ridiculous that they roll up sticks and move parliaments and, you know, and they're the sort of things that the general public really don't like to see, and that's something that I know that socialists and MEPs are against anyway. But my biggest argument would be that, you know, in the past, Britain was a mighty imperialist power. It isn't anymore. For us to be able to compete and be listened to by the rest of the world, when I'm talking about places like Brazil, India, China, South Africa and Russia, we have a better collective voice as Europe. And, you know, it's no fact, you know, the European Union often is the group that, after conflict and other hardships, go in and actually teach other countries about things like democracy and make things better. And there's some of the things that aren't celebrated. But I think in the future, if we're going to have success at things like how we tackle climate change, trafficking that goes on, improving human rights globally, then it's only going to come across if we do it as a European Union. So that's how I've been engaging. And actually, eventually, I think we're going to have to be totally honest and say it's probably going to be inevitable. We are going to have to engage in European politics, whether we like it or not. And I'm not old enough to know any better because I was born in 1977, so all I've ever known is the European Union.
There's no doubt we're going to have to concentrate on the young people's vote. The older ones, we can forget about them because we're not going to change their minds. We're just not. You would need lots of powers of persuasion to get into schools in this area. So, you know, have you got those skills to get into the schools? And having got in, have you got the skills to speak to stroppy 17-year-olds? It's no good saying all the things that you've been saying here would go right over the head of some who don't want to listen to something like that. So it's a very special skill, isn't it? Talking to 17-year-olds. So do you have any plans to do that? And having got in, are you going to let your CLP know that you're coming and describe yourself as Labour MEPs?
Great question, Edna. If I say to you that my very first exposure to the East of England, interestingly, was in the year 2000 when I got my first job after leaving university, and I was working for a company called Citizen Card. It's a proof of age card scheme. And through that, I actually visited every single secondary school in the region across all 6 counties. So that's when it started, and that's when I actually started to understand the differences in the rural urban areas between comprehensive schools, grammar schools, private schools, etc. So it's already been exposed to them. And then I'm going to disagree with some of my colleagues actually and say to you, it is absolutely totally my responsibility and my role to engage with school children, whether they're primary school or secondary school children, because one of the arguments that we're constantly having is that young people are not engaged in politics, and they are future electorate. And if we don't start engaging with them from an early age, and making them understand about the democratic process, about what it means to vote, what we stand for, then how are they going to make the decisions when it does come to voting? I would actually support a voting age of 16. I always have done. I think if people are old enough to get married and pay taxes, then they're old enough to vote. I've actually already done it before, so I'm hoping that I will get to do it. When I was at BPC in Central Suffolk, I visited both secondary schools and primary schools. Sometimes my opponents were there, sometimes they weren't. I was recently told by somebody that wrote to me during that general election campaign, actually. He said that he'd written to all the candidates, and I had responded in a manner which actually inspired him not only to join the Labour Party, but he actually recently stood in the county council elections as well, which, you know, I am immensely proud of. And he said that one of the reasons was that, you know, I am approachable and I engage with him on a level and listen to him. And that's what I think we all need to be doing. I've already said I'm a school governor, I don't have children, but I think it matters to show an interest in people's education. Obviously I'm a CRB check, and if I manage to get into any of the schools in the local area, obviously I will let you guys know. But if anybody actually requests that I should come and go and visit them, I have no qualms about going in and talking to them, because actually that is another way to get people to understand about Europe and about the elections in a wider level. So yes, thank you.
General, and I wasn't going to say anything because I'm muted on the block. But what I wondered, we haven't really talked about the economy particularly, and it is absolutely critical in Europe at the moment. You've got globalisation, you talked about India and Brazil and Russia, etc. And I just wonder how you would present that, because it seems to me that many people who touched on it are very concerned about jobs in this country, their own country. But of course, I do agree that we have to belong to Europe, but how do you sell that to people? Because currently, Europe for the past 3 years has been essentially in recession, apart from Germany. You've got all the problems with Italy, all problems with Greece, the rise of fascism, which is Islamic phobia. So I just wondered how you would tackle that.
I could be a total anorak about this and start telling you about, you know, how to present it, but actually, if I tell you a little story about how I would present it to the electorate, because actually the British electorate, man on the street, isn't interested in hearing about complicated economic policies that we do. And the conversation I had with my window planner a couple of weeks ago, who basically said to me, generally a Labour voter, Labour supporter, says to me, I'm going to vote UKIP next year. And I was like, why? And he was saying about immigration, jobs, everyone. And I just turned around and I said, do you know what? I said, I don't know how you're going to do that. And he went, well, why shouldn't I? And I said, because, you know, in the end, if we weren't part of Europe, everything would be more expensive. It's going to hit your bottom line. It's going to make things more expensive. And that's because of trade. It's a given fact that because we are part of the trading bloc, which is Europe, things are more accessible to us and cheaper. I mean, yesterday, the EU and the US signed a treaty. Now, interestingly, David Cameron called it a bilateral treaty. It's only a bilateral treaty because we are a part of Europe. It's worth £246 billion to the European economy. I would say it's a multilateral treaty, actually, but if we weren't part of Europe, and that's what they want us to do, remove us, then actually we're not going to be the ones that benefits in terms of trade, in terms of jobs, etc. And it's already been said by those nations that I've talked about, Brazil, India, China, Russia, South Africa, they've already said they're not going to trade with the UK on its own. You know, the reason why they trade is they trade with Europe. And if we were to pull out as well, we would have to negotiate all those treaties on our own. It would take absolute years, and in the meantime, the economy would carry on flatlining as it is and probably getting worse. And in the end, our standard of living would go down. So that's how I would actually present it.